magical moments. I remember somebody was talking about whether or not animals like poetry too. And then we head out into the neighborhood and we meet a woman walking this little dog. And so they ask, like, do you think your dog would like a poem? And the dog opened its mouth and like they just put the little piece of paper in and they're like, they do like poems.
Welcome to the Streets.mn podcast, the show where we highlight how transportation and land use can make our communities better places. Coming to you from beautiful Seward, Minneapolis, Minnesota, I am your host, Ian R. Buck. Today we have a delightful piece for you about Poem in Your Pocket Day, a celebration that takes place each year during April, National Poetry Month. Here in Minneapolis, a local tradition has popped up around it. Producer Stina Neel covered this story for us. So, Stina, how did this piece come to us?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. This story came to us from Max Singer from Move, Minnesota, and also a personal friend of the pod.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote us an email that said, hey, my mom is the poet in residence at a local nursery school, and they do this thing called Poem in Your Pocket Day, where it is poetry written by children age like 2 to 5, 3 to 5, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
They do art that accompanies it, and then they go out in the community and pass it out and talk to all of their neighbors. It is so stinking cute.
Mm-hmm. So just to pull the curtain back for the listeners a little bit on our process, when somebody writes in with an idea like this, I present it to the whole podcast team, and whoever's interested in covering that story, will claim it and then make it happen. So what about this caught your attention, Stina?
I don't want to say that I'm like our chief delight cultivator here on the podcast team, but immediately my heart warmed. It grew 3 sizes bigger that day, and I just knew we absolutely need to cover this.
Mm-hmm. And coincidentally, it's also a story that comes from your neighborhood.
It is.
Yeah. So who are we going to hear from today?
So I got to sit on a call with Julie Klatt, the poet in residence, and Claire Thometz, who is a teacher at Grace Neighborhood Nursery School.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing about all this.
And listeners, get really excited because at the end, some of the members of the team read some of the poems featured in this year's Poem in Your Pocket Day.
That's my favorite part of the episode for sure.
I'm Julia Klatt, and I am the poet in residence and a float teacher at Grace Neighborhood Nursery School. Some of the kids refer to me as the floating poet because and what that means is I float between the classrooms, helping in those classrooms. But as the poet, I'm in all the classrooms, writing poetry with each of the children.
I'm Claire Thometz, and I've been with Grace Neighborhood Nursery School for quite a while, I think 20 years-ish, and early on taught both of Julia's sons, Max and Grant, and that was just a delight and a pleasure. And generally, I'm with the older children, meaning the 4 and 5-year-olds, so those who are, for the most part, pre-K. And so I've had this long-standing, wonderful relationship with Julia.
So I also want to know a quick background about the school in general. So like ages, how many families?
We have about 100 spots at our school for children ranging from just under 3 years old until they go off to kindergarten. So, 5.5 years old. And one thing that really sets us apart is our poet in residence program, our poetry program.
School's been around for 62 years, 63.
Yeah, they were about a mile away, started out, just in the Kenwood neighborhood and Uptown. We've always been in Uptown. And then 3 years ago, moved to a new location. And that's been a wonderful partnership. Where the location where we're now. So it's been a part of the neighborhood, very much a neighborhood institution. Families find out about us largely through word of mouth.
So Julia, your title includes poet in residence. Can you say in your words what that means in general?
What it means is thinking about pre-literacy skills for children. We're a play-based preschool, and so they play with everything, and that's how they learn. That by coming in and introducing the idea of poetry to them, which children are read poems. Most songs that they sing are poems. They're very aware of what poetry does at a young age, just the playfulness and the capturing of details and the rhyming. But unlike writing story, which I had done with Grant's class, when you ask a 4-year-old to tell you a story, they tell you a story that they've already heard. It's a Disney story. It's a book that they've been read, and they already at that age don't have internalized the idea that a story is something from somebody else, not that they have a story. So poetry is a much cleaner way to start with the pre-literacy writing, because they don't have that many poems that they know by heart. They don't see themselves as not poets. And so it's really fascinating with the 3-year-olds. They are just trying to tell you something and making up words to do it and describing things in these really like unique and beautiful and funny ways, because it's what they've got to work with. And then you hit 4-year-olds, and I swear every one of them will start with a very factual idea, and then they just launch into imagination. It just twists into all sorts of other things. And by 5, they are really understanding the idea of movement and rhyme and trying to say something. And the 5-year-olds are the only ones that will ever say, when I read it back to them after scribing for them, oh, I didn't want to say it quite like that. I think I want this. And they'll have me go back and do editing on it. And the others know it's just, that's what they wanted to say. They said it. They're great. So yeah, it's really, and then that's the whole process with learning to write, understanding how to use words, how to find words, incorporate our ideas, and then make sure they're working. I want to say it's probably 13 or 14 years now that I've been the poet in residence. And we've been doing Poem in Your Pocket specifically for about 8.
I think that sounds about right.
9. Yeah, we didn't start it until a little bit into it. As I was poet in residence, I just remember walking into your classroom one day and talking about this cool idea, and you were like, "Yeah, we should do that. We should do that."
Let's do that. We were circling around, because with the older children, they would write poems earlier in the fall, and then we found that coming back to them in the spring, already you would just see this sort of love evolution. And so with National Poetry Month in April, Julia, you, as you said, it might have been a year or two into it, but you were aware of Poem in Your Pocket Day, and we thought this is the perfect way to have the children come back to this poetry that they had done earlier in the year. And then Poem in Your Pocket provides this great sort of concrete form of the poetry, because as Julia said, I think when children first sort of think of poetry, and they're in late elementary or middle school, there's already something that can be a little intimidating about, poetry. Oh my goodness, I can't do, they already have, it already seems like something that's challenging or difficult. And because it just, as an art form, it's one of those things that is held up, in a certain way. And yet, so introducing it to the children when they're young, 3, 4, 5, and you simply describe it to them in the context of what they're doing all the time at school, playing. It's like making a poem is simply playing with words. You play with everything else. We're in a play-filled environment. And so let's play with words the way you are, playing with everything else here. And wow, as Julia described what happens with them. And so, as I said, the concept of Poem in Your Pocket, where we came up with these little pocket poems, where literally they're just, they're doing an illustration, they're doing some art, and then they're writing the poem on the other side. And then we literally have pockets for them. Julia has these wonderful little envelopes. For them, it just bridges that arc between what is in their concrete world and what's abstract, which I think poetry can be for older children. quite abstract in a way that can be intimidating. You start them when they're 3, 4, and 5. They've been poets forever, I mean, and they are naturally poets. These children are artists, they're poets, they're all of these things, but this allows them to perceive themselves as poets and artists at those ages.
I think mostly it acknowledges their voice. And I will have parents. So I meet with the kids and I read them some poems and we talk about what a poem is. And then I start gathering theirs. I just sit and listen to them. I ask them if they have a poem and they'll be like, yep. And they'll sit down or stand next to me and tell me their poems. And then at the end of it's about a month that I'm in each classroom gathering the poems, I put together a classroom book that then I make copies and goes home with each child. And I will have parents, after every time this happens, come up to me and say, you just so got my kid's voice. Like it just sounds like them. Yeah, because just writing what they say, I'm just listening to them. It hopefully sounds like them because this is their voice. But the kids, then it gets reinforced in them what their voice is and how different all their voices are. And that there's good in all of that. Like they love reading each other's poems and hearing those different voices. And I think that's such an important part of childhood is knowing you have a voice and then how can you use it and what can you do with it and recognizing how your voice is its own unique thing.
So on Poem in Your Pocket Day, so we've already, the kids have created their poems, they've created the art, and then what happens on the actual day?
We head out into the community. And when we were at 28th and Hennepin, that meant going to the coffee shop and the Ace Hardware, the Y. There's a little clinic that we walked into, and we find people to hand the poems to. There was a senior high-rise across the street from us, so we would go over there and hand out poems, and they would know that we were coming at a certain point so we could hand out poems to them. But magical moments. I remember, and I can't remember if it was Agatha, somebody was talking about whether or not animals like poetry too. And then we head out into the neighborhood and we meet a woman walking this little dog. And so they ask, like, do you think your dog would like a poem? And the dog opened its mouth and they just put the little piece of paper in and they're like, they do like poems. And it didn't chew it. It just held it. Do you remember that? Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
That was, talk about magical. That was in the architecture firm around the corner.
Right.
The little they had. And yep, that dog just took that little poem and
held on.
It was great.
Well, and then walking into the clinic, and this was with Monta's class, it's just kind of one of those waiting rooms that are chairs set up and 4 people, but they're all like 4 chairs apart and very quiet. They're all just waiting to go in. And in we walk with 10 children asking, and the kids will walk up to them and ask, hey, it's Poem in Your Pocket Day. Would you like a poem? And people were like, sure. And then as soon as the children hand someone a poem, what they typically want to do is look at it, read it, and then say to the child, you wrote this? Or they'll laugh and they'll say, oh, I remember that. I did that too. And the amazing thing when we went into this clinic, it was so quiet when we walked in. And when we left 6-7 minutes later, those 4 people, plus the women behind the counter that were working, the nurse attendants, were all talking to each other and then showing each other the poem they'd gotten. And I ended up, one of the one of the nurses that worked there asked if I could print them larger poems and pictures so that they could put them up in their waiting room, because it was just such a magical experience for everybody who came in and was there that day. And then to leave and just hear them all talking and laughing and completely change the environment and build community was, and it happens so fast.
That instant creation of community, it happens all the time when we're out each year going into the community with these children. And, for the children, so this takes some preparation on Julia's part and the teachers as well, because this is a big thing for children this age for a couple of reasons. It's sharing something that they have made, and child development tells us that this is not something that's natural until about 4 or 5. children generally would like to keep something, especially that they created or made to themselves. And many children give something. I receive artwork all the time, but and I won't say that it's necessarily the artwork that's a little bit that doesn't meet their standard. But sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But they're learning how to do that, and so this is a big deal. And so they know that they will be able to bring some poems in their pocket home with them, but these are poems to take out into the community. And that's a really big deal for these children. But we walk into these public spaces and the coffee shop that now we're going into, your heart just, it's this heartwarming moment, because oftentimes it's now the new office space. This is where people go. So you find people that are doing focus. Maybe some are having coffee together, but you generally walk into the space where they're individuals in their own space. And these children walk in and they're not really noticed at first necessarily, but then one of them will have the courage. And I love that courage comes from the word heart, because one of these children will have the heart and the courage to walk up to somebody. Sometimes we have to encourage them a little bit, and they hand them this poem and say, "Happy Poem in Your Pocket Day." And universally, what happens is that these people take a look and they realize what it is, and they say, "Oh, did you write this? Did you make this?" And the whole environment, like Julia said, it shifts, and it's palpable. You can just feel it. And now everyone is connected by what has happened, and it can be a first for these kids. It really can, that giving something of theirs to a stranger that they don't know, for a lot of these children, they haven't done that before, so.
Watching the conversation that happens between the child and this adult, and sometimes they're in their 20s and sometimes they're in their 70s. You just watch them stand taller. They just feel like their voice and confidence grows. And often the ones that are reluctant, as soon as they hand one out, they can hardly wait to find someone else to give their second. So each child has 8 copies that I make for them to take home, and then 8 copies that we hand out into the neighborhood. Yeah, and we've met the mailman, and then as we're walking, we have a route we take to the park that we've now met a few people along that route, and we know their names because we've handed them poems and talked to them. And so the kids will point out, that's where Barb lives, and that's where Akira's, the dog, lives. And they just feel a connection to the space that they're moving through because they've shared part of themselves with the people in it. At Twin Town Guitars, we had gone in 2 years ago and handed out poems. And then last year we had headed out that direction and got there a little before 10 o'clock, so they weren't open yet. So the kids had gone up to the door and they're like, "It's not open." And one of the employees came and pushed the door open and went, "Is it that day again? Is it that day? Come in, come in." They were so excited to see them and remembered from the year prior that these children had come in to share poems with them. So yeah, I think it's, from our standpoint, handing them out is so great, but I think there's also that buzz in the neighborhood too that knows these children are going to be walking around with their poems to share very soon. And it's a great thing to get poemed. That's what some of the kids say. We're poeming people today.
I love that. So kind of getting into that. So Streets MN is a transportation, land use, urbanism organization. So we're like really big nerds on community and neighborhoods. So you touched on it quite a bit, but what role does a nursery school have in the community beyond simply it's a place of learning for just those kids?
Wow. I think that where we've been in our previous location and now really made an effort to nurture that connection, to make the school part of the community by, as Julia said, bringing these poems across the street to, there was a senior living facility. We had them involved in other programs at our school. I think that we've had this little architecture firm around the corner. They've come and we've been involved with them doing things, construction things. I think a school with young children, there's an energy that it brings and a vibrancy, and there's an intergenerational aspect to this that is invaluable because, as Julia said, you have people through Poem in Your Pocket that we encounter that are from 18 to 92, everything. And I think that for the children, they become just more, it's the next step in their awareness of the larger world. And I think that for the larger world, it's, wow, these kids, look what they're doing here. That is, they're hope for the future. I mean, we say that and it sounds really trite, but it's not. I mean, I think that when you have these children touching the lives of people, doesn't it just give us all hope where we say, you know what, maybe our world's going to be okay? Because it's, these are the people. These are the people who are going to be part of the solution, or, so I think that there's a really valuable role to that larger community in seeing these younger children what they're capable of and how they, provides hope. And I think for the children, they need that connection, intergenerational connection, and with all, every type of business and little shop and every place that they go in that community, that the sense of community we really need in our world. And I think that
and I think for because they are so young, it's the first neighborhood kind of outside of their neighborhood, and many of them live within walking distance. So the school is part of their neighborhood, and that's always been kind of the idea around it. But now you're creating the school becomes a neighbor too to everyone else around it. And certainly as we're walking to the park, because we walk over to Painter Park and to the Bryant Square Park, there's people that we see out working in their yards, and they know who we are and where we're coming from. And the children always sort of respond to them as a group. But with Poem in Your Pocket, they start to get to do things individually in the group, which also I think is just that's how we create community and neighborhood. We all share and offer and are good neighbors to each other, and they remember these adults. We have a few kids that will bring up the stranger danger thing, that they're not supposed to talk to people they don't know. But what we demonstrate is even people you don't know, you can get to know, and that your life and neighborhood feels bigger and safer because you do know those people by face and by name that you're moving through their space and sharing it with as a good neighbor.
Right. Like going from like being taught that like strangers are bad to, okay, but on Halloween you can go up to their house and ask for candy. Like,
right.
Like sometimes like that is the only time I interact with tiny little kids in my neighborhood. And I'm like, I wish I could just like be out on my porch and like wave and say hi way more often. So I'm really grumpy that I'm not going to be working from home on Thursday. Because I hear groups. It might be, because Painter Park is just around the corner from me. So maybe I hear you all on Wednesdays when I'm working from home. So a lot of the classes do get out into the community often. You mentioned that you go to the parks. So like what kind of activities does that typically entail?
So we will take walks to go to Painter Park to play. They have a fabulous playground there. We take walks just because we're going out to experience, nature and fresh air around us. We recently did what we call a little architectural walk as part of, we're doing a lot with construction right now with the children and building some structures and using a workbench. And so we're talking about the buildings and houses and things around us. And again, at this age, breaking things down and bringing it to just this very concrete level. Well, when you look at a building, it's just a combination of different shapes, and it's circles and squares and rectangles and, diamonds. And so when we went out the other day, wow, children who would not imagine, it's like with poetry, well, I can't draw a house. Can you draw a shape? Yeah, there's a shape right there. And so it's, again, creating an awareness for them. So often, as I said, there's a destination. Maybe there's a purpose where we're going to be looking at houses and we have their, journals with them. It's a day in the fall when we're going out looking for seeds because we're learning about, seeds. Or it's just a day for a walk. And on rainy days, we have umbrellas that are there by the door. And I think as a school, we're very committed to having the children be outside because we're an urban school. We're not set out in kind of a big 30-acre natural setting, but we really want the children to feel connected with the community, sense and what's around them. So we do it, and Julia can expand on this because, as she had mentioned, she's with all of the classes. But for the 4 and 5-year-olds, it's all of those things. It's a nature walk. It's going to the park. It's looking at the buildings and houses. It's just being out, going around the block just because it's a day for a walk. But I think it's so important to the children because of that, increasing their, awareness.
Well, and we've done the counting walks where you're just out counting, the trees that still have leaves on them, or the ones, or the flowers, or around Halloween, the kids are looking for pumpkins that they're counting, and helping them get that awareness of the space and the community that they're in, and then what they see as they're moving around a block. And they always see different things, and they always see different things than we perhaps are looking for too. They'll notice the worm on the ground, and then everyone would be looking at the worm and trying to figure out if it's happy there or wants to be in the puddle or in the dirt. And so there's lots of discussion about what they find as we go, and then running into the street cleaners and the construction people and the movers that are doing their tasks that they then get to ask about, how do you make all that cement spin around, and where's it going? So it's just, again, a great way for them to see the bigger world around them, the bigger community. Last year with the bidet class, the 4-year-olds, we were walking up towards the Dunn Brothers at Hennepin, and there was a street guy who had one of those mini dozers, with a big bucket in the front, and they were moving, I don't even remember if it was pipes or piles of bricks at this point, but it was 2 guys, and they had their headphones on, and one of the kids was standing there, trying to offer him a poem. And so he gets his headphones off and he starts reading it. And then his buddy, who's like somewhere else, but also through headphones, he goes wait a second. And he climbs up in the thing, and then he reads the poem over the mic so that the guy can hear it too. And then we all wait because they both wanted, to hear this poem together. And so just, for them to stop this project they're working on and then share this, and then both waving and giving them thumbs up. It's fabulous. And then he took it and tucked it up by the windshield so that he'd be able to see it and remember that. Yeah, exactly.
Sweet.
So, countless moments like that. I mean, going back to the stranger thing for just 1 second, remember we're coming out of a pandemic that, years where people were very isolated, and including the children, and really didn't have many interactions, and adults not seeing as many young children around. And so, I think that for adults still coming out of this, there are those times where, we'll have a child that will go up to somebody who's really not interested in interacting with another person, just really, and even when the child comes up to hand something and they're not really sure what's going on, when they take the poem from the child, which they always do, and they realize it is, and I have a lump in my throat right now, which was what always happens. And they realize what's happened, and they're touched by this young child. There's a smile. It ends up being this warm, interaction, imagine what that does for the child too. Where they start with this sort of situation, not being received, and then it turns into this, warm, heartwarming moment where somebody's kind of been touched by someone that we all really need, especially after having a period of time where people were just so isolated. So it's those are even the more incredible. Every one of them is incredible, but those where there's somebody who really doesn't realize how much they need this, and then it happens to them, and then it's, that's really pretty amazing. So.
Was it your class that we were going to Ace Hardware, and the young man, probably in his late 20s, is coming out, and a couple of the kids are, you want a poem, you want a poem, and he's just kind of walking. And then one of them's like, do you want a poem? It's poem in your pocket day. And then he kind of stops, realizing that they're actually talking to him. And he takes it and he starts reading it. And then he just about crumbles, and he's like, you guys, okay, you're little, I know this, you're not going to understand. My girlfriend broke up with me last night. I've had the worst day. I just didn't even know how I was going to go on. And you just completely changed my day. And you've given me like hope for people again. And you just watched him transform too. And he was just telling them, and they're all like, okay, all right. He wanted to go and buy them each a Tootsie Pop. He's like, I feel like I need to give you guys something for this. And they're like, no, we're good. We're happy to give you a poem. Oh, yeah. And you don't know how it's going to hit people.
Yeah.
But most of them, it is that really emotional closeness, wanting to share something about their life with the child because the child has shared something with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm like a little bit teary. It's fine. It's just so cute. So I'm a city planner at my day job. I work out in Chaska, and we in the business talk a lot about designing for all ages of our community members from, age 1 to 101. And you all spend a lot of time with some of our youngest neighbors out and about. So what makes this part of town, this Uptown, Lindale area, what makes this area special? What are some elements that make this place so good for families to raise their kids?
Sidewalks.
Yes. Nice wide sidewalks.
And the bicycle lanes, this is much more recent, but now it's so accessible to bicycles. And, you can see we have very much a bicycling community in our families. As Julia referenced, almost everyone's within something like a 5-mile radius or, definitely a neighborhood school. And so having families being able to get around by bicycle is huge. I think just that everything's there. It's this the residential blends with the commercial in a way that allows you to go to the places within the community. The being able to kind of have everything in your life that you need to do or want to do, kind of within a reasonable distance. And the lakes, who can? There's access to this incredible park network that we have, and
the playground, which are such a great space for them to go. They're bigger than what we have at our school, but it also is part of that community thing. We're going to run into other children there. Usually there are other families there, or there was a daycare program at Painter Park that was sometimes out with the kids too. So just in their school day alone, they get to have some community interaction and involvement, and they know that they're in a public place. And so that means, just how you are there. And if they find trash, we'll pick it up for us or point it out so that they know that this is a space that they want to be nice and clean and good. And it's a good public outing for them. And that too is like so important for community to have those spaces. We've actually, a few of the kids that are at the school are there because they've seen us at Painter Park. And the parent or the nanny or the grandparent be like, what school is this? Where are you guys? And they're looking for a place for their kids. And so it's a great community outreach too, but a really important part for us to be able to have access to playgrounds and public parks.
Yeah, and we're tucked in on a residential street, but yet, within a few blocks, you have so many different things that are accessible. And I think the accessibility is very, very important. And I think that's what the city's trying to do with that area, is make it even more so. It has that's sort of a European model, which is such a great one. I mean, that you can walk to where you need to go. And if we can get back to, we can have that, contrast that with, being out in Chanhassen or Chaska, that's, the car is necessary. And so trying to create this space where recreation, getting errands done, business, all of that can happen without having to get into a car, hopefully. So.
In a minute, we're going to hear a few of the kids' poems from this year's Poem in Your Pocket Day. But first, let's take a little break in the Parklet. So this week we have a quick question, which is something that I've been wondering about for a while. This has to do with hand signals and brake levers for cyclists in the United Kingdom. So here in the U.S., most of us grew up learning our hand signals, where most of the signals use our left hand, and in particular, even signaling a right-hand turn, you can either use your right hand outstretched, or there is the alternative version, which is your left hand held elbow at a 90-degree angle with your hand facing straight up. And there's a lot of debate on, which one of those is better. Generally, the using your left hand for that signal is considered to be like car-oriented, right? Because you are expecting most of the traffic to be on your left side, so you're using your left hand to do that signal. So I know a few urbanists who refuse to use that version of the signal, and they only use their right hand for right-hand turns, just to stick it to car culture. But I prefer using my left hand because I know that the brake levers on my bike, right, the right hand lever controls my back wheel. And if I only have one hand available for braking, I would prefer it to be the one that is controlling the back wheel, because if I suddenly slam on the brake on the front wheel, then I'm going to go over my handlebars. So this all got me wondering, in the United Kingdom, where, of course, they drive on the left side of the road, so cyclists are going to be on the left side of the road with most of the traffic on their right, do they signal with their right hands for most of their signals? Does that also mean that the brake levers are reversed, to kind of accommodate that that risk of going over your handlebars if you slam on the brakes? And the answers, it seems to be yes to both, but for the wrong reasons. So most of their signals use their right hand, which makes sense to me because most of the traffic is on their right, but they don't have like an alternative version of the left hand signal. So they use their left arm to indicate left-hand turns. They use their right arm to indicate right-hand turns. And they don't have a version of their signal where they can use their right arm to indicate a left-hand turn. So that breaks down this hypothesis a little bit. Now, when I looked into brake levers, I did find that in the UK, they have the brake levers are reversed from what I'm used to, right? So your left-hand brake lever would control the back wheel's brake, and your right-hand brake lever controls the front wheel's brake. But it seems that the history of this doesn't have anything to do with hand signals. So the history of this is that back, 120 years ago, when bicycles were first being developed and standardized and everything, in France, the common model that was adopted had just a single brake on the rear wheel, and they put the lever for that on their right hand because you needed a lot of strength in order to be able to pull that lever, and it made sense for most people with their right hand being their stronger hand. In the United Kingdom, though, the bicycles that were more common used coaster brakes, so they didn't have any hand levers whatsoever for their brakes. But then, later on, when they started introducing front brakes, in addition to the coaster brakes, they put the lever for that on the right hand, and and so you would have a bicycle that had a coaster brake for your back wheel, and a right-hand lever brake for your front wheel. And then when, people started transitioning more to having brake levers on both hands, they kept the right hand going to the front wheel, and the left hand ended up being the back wheel. So it seems like the hand signals and brake levers lined up nicely in the UK, but not actually because anybody was thinking about it in those terms. The other goofy little detail about this is that on UK bicycles, the shifting levers don't line up nicely with the brake levers. So your right hand brake lever goes to your front wheel, but your right hand shifting goes to your rear derailleur. And on your left hand, that controls your rear brake, but if you have shifting on your left hand, then that controls your front derailleur. So it's a little bit goofy. If you have any fun little questions like this that might take a little bit of research but can be a quick answer, you can write in to podcast@streets.mn and we will try to research it for you, and you might hear it on a future Parklet. Streets.mn is a community blog and podcast and relies on contributions from audience members like you. If you can make a one-time or recurring donation, you can find more information about doing so at streets.mn/donate. All right, now let's hear a few of the poems from this year's Poem in Your Pocket Day.
My Hand by Katie, age 5. My hand can pick up stuff and play with toys, and it can draw. It can stand still so you can trace it. It is good.
Marshmallow in Tent Land by Kaya, age 4. It's marshmallow in tent land, marshmallows to roast, fire and wood. They go back into their tents after they roast their marshmallows, and they even sleep and snore.
When I Bounce by Gia, age 4. When I bounce, I think about movies, books, bouncing, and my own bouncing nature. Did you know? You can bounce when you are thinking.
A Little Poem by Lainey, age 4. A little poem the size of a sandwich that we could eat for snack.
Lightning Bolt of Everything by Elian, age 5. So, paper, 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 pencil, paper, scissor, tape, pencil, sharpener, glue stick, art, lemon, lime, pear, apple, cherries, and special treats, donut with sprinkles on it, cotton candy on a stick, flavored blue raspberry, gumdrop.
This poem is a bee, just waking, shaking, its wings at the sky, now a kaleidoscope of blues. Did you know flowers will make a sweeter scent when they know you are near? Bumble and buzz, go on, dive in, you, all legs and hunger, from dust, you sweeten everything. By Julia Klatt Singer, Poem in Your Pocket Day, April 2024, as read by her son Max.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Streets.mn podcast. The show is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Non-Derivative license, so feel free to republish the episode as long as you are not altering it and you're not profiting from it. The music in this episode is by Eric Brandt and the Urban Hillbilly Quartet. The poems in this episode were read by Tom Fendt, Sherry Johnson, Ian R. Buck, Jeremy Winter, Melody Hoffmann, and Max Singer. This episode was produced by Stina Neel, hosted and edited by me, Ian R. Buck, and transcribed by Tom Fendt. We're always looking to feature new voices on the Streets.mn podcast, so if you have ideas for future episodes, drop us a line at podcast@streets.mn. Find other listeners and discuss this episode on your favorite social media platform using the hashtag StreetsMNPodcast. Until next time, take care.